Now, we have been focusing on early childhood development, the importance of reading and reading for meaning, especially in young children, the participation of parents and caregivers in ensuring that we have a society that is able to read and is productive. Joining us on the line now is Lungile Mdluli, Unicef South Africa Early Childhood Development Officer. Lungile, thanks so much for your time. And just reflecting on the responses or respondents' attitude towards play and the link thereto of early childhood development.
Good morning, Cindy, and good morning to your viewers. The statistics of having more than 43% actually of households not having books did come as a surprise and a shock to us. But I think at the same time, we are welcoming them, and because this gives us more of an opportunity to influence the society. What we actually were looking at in the study was just to see the caregivers' knowledge, attitudes, and practice with the parents and caregivers' knowledge and attitudes to children 6 years, and just try and understand what are their perceptions around play and early learning and all of that. And what we found out is that there's still quite a huge distinction and a huge limitation of knowledge from caregivers' perspective in knowing that when they do this is actually the skills that their children learn. So what we were trying to do, there's quite a lot of findings that we found in the study. It's just that this one was one hand-picked. But yeah, I think there was quite a limitation from caregivers knowing the importance of reading to their children. And we try and do that all in advocacy of just play-based learning.
All right, and just give us a sense of who the respondents are, or maybe the size of the survey. Primarily, are they in resourced areas or distressed areas, peri-urban areas, where there is a lack of interaction when it comes to early childhood development?
So this was a nationwide study. We went to all 9 provinces. We went to both urban and rural areas. And the sampling actually looked at all LSN in the society. So we looked at parents who were working, parents who were not working. And from the survey, the 43% actually shows us that, yes, more are probably the parents that have your primary education and some of the parents that are not employed. But with it being said, in the 43%, we also found that we had parents in the urban areas that had tertiary education, that were professionals, but were still not owning any books in the household.
And does that speak to the attitude that parents sometimes would have? As you are saying, you're either busy trying to put food on the table, you have to work, you have other obligations, that you leave that learning largely to the teachers, the creche or the school?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we actually also found in the study is that there's still quite a huge perception from parents who believe that learning and teaching actually is the responsibility of teachers. So there's quite a lot of parents not wanting to take that responsibility, I guess, from just teaching and learning, teaching and playing with their children. But what we also found is that we cannot factor in the elements that there are barriers to this, right? We obviously know the social economic status of the country. Parents are found having to sometimes decide whether they buy a book or they actually buy bread in the household. But I think the most important thing, if I were to reiterate, that we found in the study is that there's limited knowledge. So I think for me, it's the interest from parents, not just only the interest, but limited knowledge of them knowing the importance of what reading to a child would actually in the further future do to the child's development. So when we found out more, not just with the books but with all the other elements and findings that we found, we see that parents still do not know what skills and what knowledge children actually learn when they play or when they read books to them.
Yeah, but it's also breaking the cycle, because you can only parent as well as you know, based from your own experience, which you will then essentially apply to your own children. Do you find that that cycle hasn't necessarily been broken, where the younger generation now understand the importance of having to read to your children, interact with them, and not just to send them out into the yard, as it were, to go play on their own?
Absolutely, absolutely. And that is the one thing that we also need to affirm to the parents, because as you're saying, I can only parent my child based on my experience. My parents, for example, did not read to me, but what we need to tell the parents is that we now do have evidence that when we play with our children, when we read to our children, this is what happens, and this is how it will further contribute to their education journey and just lifelong journey as a whole. So we are trying to break and debunk those myths. I mean, the study also looked at storytelling. We saw that that is dying. And when you look at, I think we had 28% of families that said they do tell stories to their children. And we found that that is still done by your, your grandmothers and stuff. So that has not necessarily translated to the younger generation or younger parents.
And this also erodes just your family lineage and understanding who you are, your forebears, the family tree. If we are not having conversations, let alone that this would be for academic purposes, that the child would comprehend what they're learning, but it's also just in terms of keeping record of your history.
That's correct. That's correct. So that's the other thing that we need to advocate for when we do our parenting programs, because Unicef is quite big in advocating for parenting programs, and these are the conversations that we need to start also having with the older generation, because in most cases the parent would also be there with the child to say that we need to have these conversations going, because we as UNICEF and just the ECD society at large, we're not really necessarily advocating and saying please go and buy the book, because we do understand the social and economic status of the country, but we also need to start having those conversations to say storytelling on its own is very good, because the skills that a child also learns from just reading a book to them, they would equally get when you tell a story. But we're also advocating for just teaching parents that they can actually also make their own books. We're trying to create conducive environments in society where there can be support groups from parents. Parents can go to ECD programs and perhaps borrow books. They can form play groups and all of that. And this comes with statistics, knowing that quite a lot of our children in South Africa from the ages of 0 to 4, I think more than 55% are actually in the households and not in early learning programs.
Lungile, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you indeed for your time. That's Lungile Mdluli, UNICEF South Africa Early Childhood Development Officer, talking about the importance of learning or engaging with your children during play as they also develop critical skills for early childhood development.